When we are conditioned to always communicate in our feminine energy from a young age, when we're at school, when we're at work, and we're around people, it comes off very bland, it can come off very analytical. How is it that if you're looking for a man in his masculine energy and all you know is how to communicate in a masculine way, you're going to easily repel each other? Because masculine and masculine, it's not going to magnetize and the polarity isn't there. So there's easy ways to shift into your feminine energy and learn how to communicate to a man that you may be interested in a feminine way. Hi ladies, welcome back. Really excited to talk about this topic today. It's all about communicating in your feminine energy. We don't realize how often we communicate in our masculine, especially if you tend to be an overthinker or worrier, if you have anxiety, or if you are constantly in survival mode. A lot of the times we'll take our way of communicating in school or at work or even to strangers, we'll carry that with us home and around to the people we love and even your partner. If you are a feminine woman and you want to embrace your feminine energy, it's harder for you to make that switch from going outside of being in your masculine and communicating from your headspace to going back home, resting into your body and communicating to your man in a feminine way. So I have some tips for you today. And to start off, my first tip is going to be you have to use feeling statements when you communicate with a man. I would kind of like to call those your sensual statements. Things that can bring up sensuality, playfulness in a woman. When you speak from a place of feeling and from a place of emotion, guys find that a lot more genuine. People in general will find that a lot more genuine, and they appreciate that you're being a bit more vulnerable. When you're talking to a man and he asks like, "Hi, how are you?" Instead of saying, "I'm good, just got home from work, I'm tired, how are you?" You can say, "Work was great, but when I went onto the train, I felt really out of body, I have a slight headache, I just couldn't wait to take my heels off and rest my feet when I got home from work." Play it up a little bit. I think masculine energy communication is a bit choppy. It's just kind of like a bold statement after another or a regular statement after another. It also adds warmth and sensuality to the conversation when you're talking to a man, because when you open up that feeling and that emotion and that vulnerability, he's going to tend to want to explore that side of you and feel more comfortable to do it around you as well. And the vulnerability that you exude also gives him a space to connect with you a lot easier, instead of keeping it a bit more professional or keeping things more surface level. When you just introduce anything about your day that made you feel something, that's going to kind of give him a bit more leeway into opening up the conversation and ask you more about you and understand how you work as a woman. My next tip for communicating in your feminine energy is make sure you have open and receptive body language. I've noticed if I'm ever kind of in a tiff with my husband, or we might be arguing and we have a disagreement on something, I notice if we are standing on opposite sides of the bed or opposite sides of the room, I literally feel the tension there. Like, all I feel, the energy in the room, it just feels hard and it feels unwelcoming. I'll have my arms crossed, your body's closed off. Sometimes his hands will be on his hips. There is no kind of bodily communication. And that's the thing. Communication is more than just your words. People communicate through their actions and their energy all the time. We decide in any type of argument that we want to close off. It's kind of a survival mode tactic. It's a way for us to feel safe, because there's been times before where we've opened up and been vulnerable and it's been rejected or it's been ignored. So naturally, when we get into an argument with our man, you just kind of want to close off and, stick to your guns and talk through emotion and talk through your headspace instead of your body. It comes across more like a duel against each other rather than trying to figure out a solution together. And I would suggest, if you are in an argument with your man, if you both can, allow physical touch. For a lot of men, physical touch is their love language, because it's something that as they grow older, that's not something they're used to. As women, when we're with our girlfriends, we're hugging, we're laughing, we can be close to one another. With guys, it's a bit different. When guys are out and they're in their masculine energy, it's not all about physical touch. So as a woman, your touch, the way you nurture, is very important to a man. I would suggest get closer to him. When I notice that there's that energy in the room with me and my husband, I or him will either have us sit down together and we ensure that our bodies are facing one another. Like, you're sitting kind of at each other like a V shape almost. Your knees are pointed toward each other, your arms are open. I like to hold his hand, or I'll touch his face, something that comforts both of us, or he'll hold my knee. Anything to ensure that physical touch is still there, we still love each other, and we want to support one another. When your body is open, it shows that you're open towards what your man has to say, and you're open towards resolving the problem or the conflict. My third tip in communicating in your feminine energy, you want to drop into your body when communicating instead of going from your head. When you're talking to your man and you're doing it from your headspace, like I said before, it comes out a bit more logical and analytical, especially let's say there's a disagreement. If you're talking from your headspace, all you're thinking about is the emotion that you're feeling right there in that very second. So that's why it's easy for us to say something we don't mean. Where instead, if we drop into our body, we can acknowledge what we're actually feeling. You're in any type of argument with your man, or there's a miscommunication, it's important to lead with your body and understand what you're feeling instead of going on the defense where your emotion could be anger. I tend to do this a lot. A lot of the times I want to go back to my old toxic patterns and how when I would be in situationships or toxic relationships, I would just rule for my masculine. I would allow myself to get triggered and speak from my head. But when I'm with my husband, I think about what I need to say and what I'm actually feeling. And a lot of the times the feeling is sadness, or it's hurt, or it's the fear of being vulnerable. That's how I feel in my body. And I have to communicate that with him instead of going on the defense and just reacting from what he's saying. And sometimes it takes me a moment to breathe and drop from my head and just go from a place of where I felt misunderstood or a traumatic event that happened to me. And a lot of the times I have to take a breath, drop from my head, and go into my feelings. Because a lot of the times when there's miscommunication or an argument where you're feeling triggered, it's a result of something that happened in your past, and it's up to you to kind of go inward and really feel that feeling again so you can understand why there's this miscommunication. My next tip is you ladies need to use I statements instead of you statements. And this is a very, very common tip just in healthy communication in general, but I find it, of course, in feminine energy, it's just as useful. An I statement is being in your body, a you statement would be being in your head. So like how I'm talking to you and I'm teaching you and I'm telling you things and I'm trying to ingrain this into your head, that is me kind of disciplining you, and that's me speaking from my masculine energy. When you're using I statements, it comes from a place of feeling. You're explaining your side, you're explaining how you feel, you're explaining exactly what you're trying to navigate through the situation. When you use a lot of you statements in an argument or anytime you're communicating with your man, if you're trying to explain something to him or teach him something, which is also something I'm going to get to, it can come off very accusatory, like you're accusing him of something. Men communicate best from emotion and feeling, which is why you use the I statements. If you use the you statements and you're trying to teach him, men don't respond to that well. They kind of just block that out. It's kind of like, because again, it sounds like you're mothering him, and I also have a video on mothering as well. And if you guys are in a moment of an argument or miscommunication, the reason it's best to come from a place of feeling is because men enjoy finding a solution and fixing a problem. What you can do is you can exude, I feel this way because of what has happened to me before. You can allow him to kind of sit on that, understand it. And a lot of men, they don't want to hear you saying, well, I know you're like this because this is what happened to you. They want to find it out for themselves because what fuels them is fixing things and helping find a solution for each other. My next tip for communicating in your feminine energy is you ladies need to practice active listening and let go of doing the silent treatment. If you tend to use the silent treatment, it definitely comes from a place of wounded energy. It's from a traumatic experience that you may have had. It could be from childhood, it could be from previous relationships, but it's important that we do not practice the silent treatment on our partners. When you use the silent treatment on a man, it's going to make them feel punished, and again, like they're being disciplined, like you're trying to teach them something, which is again, ruling from your headspace. You're ruling out of anger and frustration. I think active listening is actually some of the most important things that feminine communication has, because as women, we offer that nurturing and warm energy, that safe space for a man to kind of exude his emotions and his vulnerability. Like I've said many times before, we are in a society where emotions and vulnerability isn't very practiced because it's kind of frowned upon. Especially as men, they're taught that they should not show that at all. So it's important to actively listen when he is trying to tell you something And as women, we give that safe space for them to share their thoughts and emotions. And active listening is important so you can understand what he's saying, so you can also ask simpler questions. Again, if men aren't used to communicating their emotions, they're not going to be able to talk like us, how we can go on, 3, 4, 5 paragraph sentences about what we're feeling and how to kind of nitpick at it and understand it. They're a bit simpler. You just need to say things in a shorter sentence or simplified so they can understand it, while they also feel like you're hearing them. As we wrap up this video, I just want to mention that a lot of women tend to think, or a lot of people on the internet tend to think, that when we want to communicate in a feminine way to our man, they see it as we're babying them and we're treating them like a child, because we say, use simpler language. Just talk about how you're feeling and rule from your body, and don't, accuse someone of things, and don't let your anger overrule you. And that's because feminine communication is the most healthy way of communicating. It comes from a place of understanding and a place of learning. It's okay for us to acknowledge that men and women have different ways of communicating naturally. We all grew up with a masculine way of communicating because that is what society deemed as appropriate. But now we can make that shift, and as women, we can embrace our feminine energy, we can embrace feminine communication, and we can now speak in a more feminine way instead of everyone ruling from the masculine and talking surface level, or letting their anger overrule them, speaking out of survival mode and constantly in a state of anxiety or depression. Speaking in a feminine way allows us to navigate situations or dating in a much easier way. Babying your man would come from your masculine and headspace. Just using simple I statements, going into your body and resting in there when you're trying to communicate with your man, that's going to be you ruling from your feminine energy. Okay, ladies, that is all for today. I hope you enjoyed the video. It was really fun making this. I love talking to you about ways on how to switch up your communication and how to come from a place of understanding, especially on your feminine energy journey. So I will see you ladies next week. Bye.